Welcome, friends. Welcome, weirdlings. Welcome, esteemed anthropologists, colleagues, and disciples. One is welcome, and all is welcome. Except for you. Why are you listening to this? You are not welcome. This is the Black Mass podcast with me, Theodore Bonaparte. I am the part of Theodore Bonaparte in this Black Mass podcast, and today we are in the midst of the bleak winter, and so we're going to discuss a frosty subject. Today's subject of the podcast is the Dyatlov Pass incident, which to the mysterious deaths of 9 ski hikers in the northern Ural Mountains. And it's quite a mysterious story, to say the least. Now, let's begin straight away at the beginning. And before I start, please, Jesus Christ, forgive me for these terrible name pronunciations. A group was formed for a ski trek across the northern Urals in Sverdlovsk Oblast. The original group, led by Igor Dyatlov, consisted of 8 men and 2 women. Most were students or graduates of Ural Polytechnical Institute, now Ural Federal University. Here are the people, and again, I do apologize. Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader, born January 13th, 1936. As a side note, this took place on February 2nd, 1959. Secondly, Yuri Dorenchenko, born January 29th, 1938. Ludmila Dubinina, born May 12th, 1938. Yuri Krivonischenko, I believe, born February 7th, 1935. Alexander Kolevatov, born November 16th, 1934. Ziniada Kolmogorova, born January 12, 1937. Rustem Slobodin, born January 11, 1936. Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignol, July 8, 1935. And Simeon Zolotarov, February 2nd, 1921. Yuri Yefimovich Yudin, born 1937, died April 27th, 2013. There's a little clue there. That last one did not die in the incident. Is that a clue into the mysterious circumstances of these people's disappearance? I'll spoil it now for you. No. The goal of the expedition was to reach Otorten, a mountain 10 kilometers north of the site of the incident. This route in February was estimated as Category 3, the most difficult. All members were experienced in long ski mountain expeditions. The group arrived by train at Ividel, a city at the center of the northern province of Sverdlovsk Oblast, on January 25th. They then took a truck to Vizhai, the last inhabited settlement so far north. They started their march towards Otorten from Vizhai on January 27th. The next day, one of the members, Yuri Yudin, was forced to go back to the village due to illness. The remaining group of 9 people continued the trek. That's why there's no clue or evidence in secret to his not dying. He was in fact not there. Diaries and cameras found around their last campsite made it possible to track the group's route up to the day preceding the incident. On January 31st, the group arrived at the edge of a highland area and began to prepare for climbing in a wooded valley. On January 31st, the group arrived at the edge of a highland area and began to prepare for climbing. In a wooded valley, they cached surplus food and equipment that would be used for the trip back. The following day, February 1st, the hikers started to move through the pass. It seems they planned to get over the pass and make camp for the next night on the opposite side, but because of worsening weather conditions, snowstorms and decreasing visibility, they lost their direction and deviated west up towards the top of Kolotkal. When they realized their mistake, the group decided to stop and set up camp there on the slope of the mountain, rather than moving 1.5 kilometers downhill to a forested area, which would have offered some shelter from the elements. Yudin postulated that Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the altitude they had gained, or he decided to practice camping on the mountain slope. Before leaving, Dyatlov had agreed he would send a telegram to the sports club as soon as the group returned to Vizhai. It was expected that this would happen no later than February 12th, but Dyatlov had told Yudin before his departure from the group that he expected to be longer. When the 12th passed and no messages had been received, there was no immediate reaction, as delays of a few days were common in such expeditions. It was not until the relatives of the travelers demanded a rescue operation on February 20th that the head of the institute sent the first rescue groups consisting of volunteer students and teachers. Later, the army and the militia forces became involved, with planes and helicopters being ordered to join the rescue operation. On February 26th, the searchers found the group of abandoned and badly damaged tents on Kolotkal. The campsite baffled the search party. Mikhail Shavrin, the student who found the tent, said the tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty and the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind. Investigators said the tent had been cut open from the inside. Curious. 8 or 9 sets of footprints left by people who were wearing only socks, a single shoe, or were even barefoot could be followed, leading down towards the edge of a nearby wood on the opposite side of the pass, 1.5 kilometers to the northeast. However, after 500 meters, these tracks were covered with snow. At the forest's edge, under a large cedar, the searchers found the visible remains of a small fire, along with the first 2 bodies, that of, it would be the most difficult one, Krivonishenko and Doroshenko. Shoeless and dressed only in their underwear, the branches on the tree were broken up to 5 meters high, suggesting that the skiers had jumped up to look for something, perhaps the camp. Between the cedar and the camps, the searchers found 3 more corpses: Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin, who seemed to have died in poses suggesting that they were attempting to return to the tent. They were found separately at distances of 300, 480, and 630 meters from the tree. Searching for the remaining 4 travelers took more than 2 months. They were finally found on May the 4th under 4 meters of snow in a ravine 75 meters further into the woods from the cedar tree. These 4 were better dressed than the others, and there were signs that those who had died first had apparently relinquished their clothes to the others. Zolotarov was wearing Dubinina's faux fur coat and hat, while Dubinina's foot was wrapped in a piece of Krivoshenko's wool pants. Another notable find besides the 4 remaining hikers was a camera found round Zolotarov's neck. The camera was not reported as having been part of the equipment. Also, the film in the camera was reported to have been damaged by water. Strange. A legal inquest started immediately after finding the first 5 bodies. A medical examination found no injuries which might have led to their deaths, and it was eventually concluded that they had all died of hypothermia. Slobodin had a small crack in his skull, but it was not thought to have been a fatal wound. An examination of the 4 bodies which were found in May shifted the narrative as to what had occurred during the incident. 3 of the ski hikers had fatal injuries. Thibaut Brignoles had major skull damage, and both Duminina and Zolotarev had major chest fractures. According to Dr. Boris Vozrozdeny, the force required to cause such damage would have had to have been extremely high, comparing it to the force of a car crash. Notably, the bodies had no external wounds related to the bone fractures, as if they had been subjected to high levels of pressure. However, major external injuries were found on Dubinina, who was missing her tongue, her eyes, part of her lips, as well as facial tissue and a fragment of skull bone. She had also extensive skin maceration on the hands. It was claimed that Dubinina was found lying face down in a small stream that ran under the snow, and that her external injuries were in line with putrefaction in a wet environment, and were unlikely to be related to her death. There was initial speculation that the indigenous Mansi people might have attacked and murdered the group for encroaching upon their lands, but investigators indicated that the nature of their deaths did not support this hypothesis. The hikers' footprints alone were visible, and they showed no sign of hand-to-hand struggle. Now, although the temperature was very low, around -25 to -30 degrees Celsius, with a storm blowing, the dead were only partially dressed. Some of them had only 1 shoe, while others had no socks, or wore only socks. Some were found wrapped in snips of ripped clothing that seemed to have been cut from those who were already dead. Journalists reporting on the available parts of the inquest files claim that it states 6 of the group members died of hypothermia and 3 of fatal injuries. There were no indications of other people nearby on Sklatska, apart from the 9 travelers. The tent had been ripped open from within. Very strange. The victims had died 6 to 8 hours after their last meal. Traces from the camp show that all group members left the campsite of their own accord and not on foot. To dispel the theory of an attack by the indigenous Mansi people, Dr. Boris, here's that name again, Vozrozdreny, stated that the fatal injuries of the 3 bodies could not have been caused by another human being because the force of the blows had been too strong and no soft tissue had been damaged. Forensic radiation tests had shown high doses of radioactive contamination on the clothes of a few of the victims. Curious. There were no survivors of the incident. At the time, the verdict was that the group members all died because of a compelling natural force. The inquest officially ceased in May 1959 as a result of the absence of a guilty party. The files were sent to a secret archive, and the photocopies of the case became available only in the 90s, although some parts, funnily enough, were missing. Now, here's the controversy regarding the investigation. 12-year-old Yuri Kuntsevich, who would later become the head of the Yekaterinburg-based Dyatlov Foundation, attended 5 of the hitchhikers' funerals and recalled their skin had a deep brown tan. Another group of hikers, about 50 kilometers south of the incident, reported that they saw strange orange spheres in the night sky to the north of the night of the incident. Similar spheres were observed in Ivdel and adjacent areas. continually during the period from February to March 1959 by various independent witnesses, including the Meteorologist Service and the military. Some reports suggest that there was a great deal of scrap metal in and around the area, leading to speculation that the military had utilized the area secretly. Now, in 1967, Sverdlovsk writer and journalist Yuri Yarovy published the novel of the highest degree of complexity, inspired by the incident. Yarovy had been involved in the search for Dyatlov group and the inquest as an official photographer during both the search and the initial stage of the investigation, and there are the photos that you can look for on Google, and they are very, very interesting and slightly disturbing. The book was written during the Soviet era when details of the accident were kept secret, and Yarovy avoided revealing anything beyond the official position and well-known facts. The book romanticized the incident and had much more of an optimistic end than the real events. Only the group leader was found deceased. Yarovy colleagues say that he had alternative versions of the novel, but both were declined because of censorship. Since Yarovy's death in 1980, all of his archives, including photos, diaries, and manuscripts, have been mysteriously lost. Anatoly Gushinchin summarized his research in the book, The Price of the State Secret is 9 Lives. Some researchers criticized the novel due to its concentration on the speculative theory of a Soviet secret weapon experiment, but its publication led to public discussion stimulated by interest in the paranormal. It was alien men from the sky. I do apologize. Indeed, many of those who had remained silent for 30 years reported new facts about the incident. One of them was the former police officer Lev Ionov, who led the official inquest in 1959. In 1990, he published an article which included his admission that the investigation team had no rational explanation for the incident. He also stated that after his team reported that they had seen flying spheres, he then received direct orders from high-ranking regional officials to dismiss this claim. In 2000, a regional television company produced the documentary film The Mystery of Dyatlov Pass. With the help of a film crew, a Yekaterinburg writer, Anna Mateyeva, published a fiction/documentary novella of the same name. A large part of the book includes broad quotations from the official case, diaries of victims, interviews with searchers, and other documentaries collected by the filmmakers. The narrative line of the book details the everyday life and thoughts of a modern woman, an alter ego of the author herself, who attempts to resolve the case. Yes, we all know how that goes. Despite its fictional narrative, Matveyeva's book remains the largest source of documentary materials ever made available to the public regarding the incident. In addition, the pages of the case files and other documentaries in photocopies and transcripts are gradually being published on a web forum for enthusiastic researchers. A Dyatlov Foundation was founded in Yekaterinburg with the help of Ural State Technical University, led by Yuri Kontsevich, who was the little girl at the funerals of the 5 hikers. Led by Kontsevich. That's a very unfortunate name. The foundation stated the aim is to convince current Russian officials to reopen the investigation of the case and to maintain the Dyatlov Museum to preserve the memory of the dead hitchhikers. Now, we get on to the possible explanations. Number 1. Avalanche. The theory that an avalanche caused the hitchhikers' death. I keep saying hitchhikers. The theory that an avalanche caused the hikers' deaths, while intentionally popular, has been questioned. Reviewing the sensationalist Yeti hypothesis, American skeptic author Benjamin Radford, that's an easier name, suggests as more plausible that the group woke up in a panic, and they cut their way out of the tent, either because an avalanche had covered the entrance to their tent or because they were scared that an avalanche was imminent. Better to have potentially repairable slit in the tent than risk being buried alive in under tons of snow. They were poorly clothed because they had been sleeping and ran into the safety of the nearby woods where trees would help slow oncoming snow. In the darkness of night, they got separated in 2 or 3 groups. One group made a fire, hence the burned hands, while the others tried to return to the tent to recover the clothing, since the danger had apparently passed. But it was too cold, and they all froze to death before they could locate their tent in the darkness. At some point, some of the clothes may have been recovered or swapped from the dead, but at any rate, the group of 4 whose bodies were most severely damaged were caught in an avalanche and buried under 13 feet of snow, more than enough to account for the compelling natural force the medical examiner described. Dubinina's tongue was likely removed by scavengers and ordinary predation. However, contrary to what Radford states, this is very unlikely, and evidence contradicting the avalanche theory includes: the location of the incident did not have any obvious signs of an avalanche having taken place. An avalanche would have left certain patterns and debris distributed over a wide area. The bodies found within 10 days of the event were covered in a very shallow layer of snow, and there had been an avalanche. Had there been an avalanche of sufficient strength to sweep away the second party, these bodies would have been swept away as well. This would have caused more serious and different injuries in the process and would have damaged the tree line. Over 100 expeditions to the region were held since the incident, and none of them ever reported conditions that might create an avalanche. A study of the area using up-to-date terrain-related physics revealed that the location was entirely unlikely for such an avalanche to have occurred. The dangerous conditions found in another nearby area, which had significantly steeper slopes and cornices, were observed in April and May, when the snowfalls of winter were melting. During February, when the incident occurred, there were no such conditions. An analysis of the terrain, the slope, and the incline indicates that even if there could have been a very specific avalanche that circumvents the other criticisms, its trajectory would have bypassed the tent. It had collapsed laterally, but not horizontally. Dyatlov was an experienced skier, and the much older Alexander Zolotarev was studying for his master's certificate in ski instruction and mountain hiking. Neither of these 2 men would have been likely to camp anywhere in the path of a possible avalanche. And if you were to look at the pictures, there are pictures before, taken from the cameras of the party, showing it's either a flag or a ski pole stuck up next to the tent in the snow. And the same ski pole is shown in the crime scene photos. Don't you think an avalanche would have knocked that over? Yes. Another hypothesis popularized by Donny Icar's 2013 book, Dead Mountain, is that the wind going round Holatachi Mountain created a Kármán vortex street which can produce infrasound capable of inducing panic attacks in humans. So they went crazy because of a natural dog whistle, perhaps? Some people believed it was a military accident which was then covered up. There are records of parachute mines being tested by the Russian military in the area around the time the hitchhikers were there. Parachute mines detonate a meter or 2 before they hit the ground and produce similar damage to those experienced by the hikers. Heavy internal damage with very little external trauma. There were also glowing orbs reported in the sky in that general vicinity, possibly caused by such ordnance. This theory uses animals to account for the missing nose, tongue, and leg of certain victims. People believe the bodies were moved. Photos of the tent show that it was apparently erected incorrectly, something that these experienced hikers are unlikely to have done. iScience Times posited that the hikers' deaths were caused by hypothermia, which can induce a behavior known as paradoxical undressing, in which hypothermic subjects remove their clothes in response to a perceived feeling of burning warmth. That 6 out of the 9 hikers died of hypothermia is undisputed. The hypothesis doesn't address why the hikers fled the tent in the first place, however. The temperature inside the tent would not have been low enough to induce paradoxical undressing. Now, the 2014 Discovery Channel special, Russian Yeti, The Killer Lives, explored the cryptozoology theory that the Dyatlov group was killed by a mink or a Russian Yeti. Writer and skeptic Benjamin Radford wrote on the Doubtful News website that the Russian Yeti begins with the premise that the injury sustained by the skiers was so grave and extraordinary that they could have been inflicted by an inhumanly strong creature. And the creature didn't leave footprints? The show focuses on Ludmila Dubinina's missing tongue and claims that something must have ripped it out of her. However, Radford states, as it happens, a tongue-eating Yeti is by far the least likely explanation. The missing parts aspect of this case is a familiar one to skeptics and has been invoked in countless other unsolved mysteries, including the chupacabra, cattle mutilations, satanic animal sacrifices, and aliens. Typically, a mystery is mongered by those unfamiliar with or who intentionally ignore ordinary predation and decomposition. Lots of animals, both big and small, scavenge on the soft parts of dead bodies. Another possibility is that Dubinina was caught in an avalanche and that the force of the snow and rocks caused her tongue to be bitten off as she yelled and tumbled down the ravine where she was eventually found. The episode admits it found no real evidence to prove that the Yeti exists. Yes. However, the episode also states that one of the hikers did write in the journal, "The snowman exists." Now, what do you think, weirdlings? Was it an avalanche? Was it Russian military? Yes. Was it aliens from space? Were the hikers just simply retarded and made all of the wrong decisions at the wrong times? Was it paradoxical undressing? I believe, personally, to a degree it was. Or was it? Let me know what you think. Until next time, you were listening to Black Mass with Theodore Bonaparte. Next week is a big one. We're going to be covering a brief history of the occult. I was going to do it this week, but it turns out that you can't just do a podcast on the occult without digging up lots and lots of weird things. So we'll see. See you next week. Much love. God bless.